Chapter 3, Migration, the second chapter to Unit 2. Your unit objectives for all 4 key issues. Today's content objective: where are migrants distributed and what factors explain their diffusion and relocation? Key issue 1, I-CAN statements. Differentiate immigrants from emigrants. 2. Calculate net in and net out migration. 3. Describe the difference between international and internal migration. 4. Identify 3 factors why people migrate or immigrate and give specific examples. 5. Describe the difference between a refugee and an immigrant. And lastly, summarize Zielinski's migration model. All right. Mobility is the movement. Movement can be a journey from a daily activity, work to school, or from home to work, or from school to home, vice versa. It can be weekly visits to any retailers. It can be annual trips, vacations. Short-term and repetitive acts are called circulation, such as college students going to school in the fall and returning in the spring. That's known as an example of circulation. A permanent move to a new location is a migrant, and that movement is called migration. An immigrant or an emigrant is somebody that exits. So think emigrant, exit. Exits a country. Immigrant, think of I as in. They immigrate, they come into a new location. For instance, emigrants leave from place A and go to place B. Immigrants will leave place B to go to place A. The difference between the two numbers of immigrants and the number of emigrants is the place's net migration. So if a country has more immigrants than they have emigrants, they have a net in migration or a net migration. If a country has more people leaving the country, emigrants, than they have people coming in, immigrants, then they have a negative net migration. Ravenstein's laws, 2 of which we will discuss in migration. The first is, Ravenstein is a geographer that in the 1900s stated that most migrants travel short distances within their same country or between countries. He also stated that long-distance immigrants, or people that migrate, will go to major centers or economic activities, so major cities. Migration can be divided into 2 categories. The first is international migration. That's movement from one country to another. International can be either voluntary or forced migration. 2 is internal migration. Internal migration is going to be the movement in the same country, and that movement can be either interregional or intra-regional. And we'll get into those later in the notes. We can look at this map of Mexico and the states within Mexico. We can see international, and the Nuevo León is the northern state next to Coahuila, and they would be internationally migrating into the United States. Meanwhile, to the south, you have Central Americans migrating into the city of Chiapas in Mexico. That would be international migration, moving between countries. Interregional migration, that's moving between regions, so moving between states. As we can see let's take a look at this arrow right here. The state of Zacatecas going to Chihuahua. That is interregional migration. It's an internal interregional migratory pattern. Interregional pattern in the United States is common. The most common in internal interregional migration is from migrants from the Midwest to the South, 2 regions within the United States. Intra-regional is moving within a state. Intra-regional would be examples of moving within the state to Mexico City, which is also common of major cities in the U.S. We see a lot of intra-regional between what is the city and suburbs, so moving within that metropolitan area. Eastern Europe is a source of regional migrants moving from Western and Northern Europe, in particular Germany. We can see the migratory pattern. Those that are dark green have a net in that's the highest, net in of 12 or more per 1,000 inhabitants. When we look at those that have lost or net out, we can see the countries of Spain and Poland with other Eastern European countries, but predominantly Southern Europe and Eastern Europe would have net out, meaning that means they would have a negative net migration. And countries that are in the west or northern parts of Europe have a net in migration. They bring in more immigrants than emigrants that leave those countries. Approximately 9% of the world's population internationally migrate. The global pattern reflects developing countries to developed countries. So we can see a predictable pattern, a flow pattern, that roughly that 9% goes from Asia to Europe, or from Asia to North America, or from Latin America to North America. Those are the most common patterns. Net out countries or regions are Asia, Latin America, and Africa. Net in migration are countries that are furthest along the DTM stages, stage 4 countries. North America, Canada, the United States, Europe, DTM stage 4 countries in Oceania, primarily New Zealand as well as Australia. Here shows a flow chart of the pattern. Keep in mind when we look at the United States, foreign-born residents that come from other countries are approximately 43 million as of 2010, and growing by 1 million annually. There's the higher rates net in migration than including our neighbor to the north, Canada, and Australia and Europe. We have the highest net in migration of any country destination in the world. Zielinski's model is taking the DTM stages and telling about the transition, the migration transition within those stages. He says in stage 1, there's only seasonal mobility, so you see circulatory patterns, and that's following the food source. Stage 2, he states that there's high international emigration. So countries that are in stage 2 today, think about countries that we saw in stage 2, Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and parts of Southwest Asia. A lot of those countries are internationally migrating. And to a certain degree, they're also interregionally migrating from rural to urban. We'll see it in the same regions. South Asia, Southeast Asia, Southwest Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. We'll see both migration patterns. International and interregional, which is an internal migration pattern from rural to urban. We also move on to stage 3, and we see stage 3 is where we see a high international immigration. So think of countries like Mexico, stage 3, or other South America or Central American countries. And also Eastern Europe would be stage 3 countries, and we see high international migration, but also a large intra-regional, and that is from cities to suburbs. And really, the difference between 3 and 4 is in 4 we see more movement from city to suburbs, so more intra-regional migration. All right, factors for migration. There are push factors, which tells us why people emigrate. And there are pull factors, and that tells us why people immigrate. There are 3 major push and pull factors. The first is political, the second is environment, and the third is economic. There are also political factors. Political factors are refugees, and those are people that are forced to migrate out of their country and because of a potential threat to their life or they fear persecution, imminent persecution. There's also internationally displaced persons. Internationally displaced is that they're internationally displaced, just like it says. They're similar to refugee, but they have not gained they have not crossed international borders. They have not gained acceptance into a country. Asylum seekers migrate to another country in hoping to be recognized as refugees. Skilled workers do not qualify. With asylum seekers, it's very similar to step migration. Step migration, again, is when you have a person from a country of origin stop at numerous countries along the way before their final destination country. Those are asylum seekers. Historical refugees fall within the five main eras. We see European colonization. Slaves were forced out of the Americas. Half went to Central and South America, and 1 million went to the colonial America. After World War II, we had about 25 million permanently relocated, 23 million in Europe. We see guest workers to Europe after World War II. We see the Era 3 with Soviet Union in the 20th century, moving largely from east to large cities in the west of the Ural Mountains to cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg. And then we also see migration to the west to labor camps in Siberia. That would have been during right after World War II with the reign of Stalin, forcing people into labor camps in Siberia. And the fourth is Indonesia with refugees, and we see about 8 million out of the most populous island of Java to other remote islands of Indonesia. And then Syria in modern day, today, and that's because of civil war that started by ethnic conflict, which also stems from political conflict. We can look at refugees in 2012. We can see a large portion are in areas that are less developed or unstable governments. Southwest Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. When we talk about migration and the factors of migration, one can be an environmental factor. Environmental pull factors can be warmer climates, the mountains, the seasides, the oceans, the lakes, the rivers. Those can be environmental pull factors for internal migration as well as international migration. Environmental push factors can be natural disasters such as flooding or drought, as we can see with Bangladesh, with a country that has a very large population that ranks in the top 10 most populous countries, and much of their country is below sea level. Or we see the drought conditions in areas of the Sahel or the Sahel desert region of North Africa, and the drought conditions have left in Somalia, the most recent, in 2019, 22 million migrating because of starvation. Reasons for migrating: voluntary migration is the main reason because of economic push factors. They migrate for better quality of life, better economic opportunity. And place utility is the measure of one's satisfaction based on the past and expected future rewards. So oftentimes their place utility will see themselves as as a better quality of life or more satisfaction with migrating. Economic push factors. Push factors can be migrating from places with few jobs. Pull factors can be jobs, like the opening of a factory, or maybe a large multinational corporate headquarters. Those could be pull factors. Economic opportunity. U.S. and Canada, for economic migrants, historically, individuals came from Europe, and most recently from Latin America and Asia. Southwest Asia is a region for economic pull factors. Lacking large workforce and guest workers provide the necessary labor for the expected capacity and infrastructure for the oil and gas industries. And then also we look at the majority of workers in Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh are guest workers that migrate to Southwest Asia. EU is an economic pull. 2018, the largest migrants from refugee status countries like Afghanistan and Iraq seeking asylum.